Hello there, my name's Dr. Richard Benjamin and I'm the head of the International Slavery Museum here in Liverpool. I'm also a board member of Monitor. It's been an incredibly difficult and momentous couple of weeks for me and the International Slavery Museum team in particular. There's been a convergence of issues really for us as a museum. That's the continued racial violence in the US and the UK and the horrendous murder of George Floyd. There was the issue of the removal of the Colston statue in Bristol, and there's also ongoing discussions in my own city here of Liverpool around street names. And we're actually part of a task force within the city of Liverpool that's looking at adding interpretation to street signs around the city, many of them named after traders and enslaved Africans. So where are we as a sector and how we deal with these issues? Well, the International Slavery Museum has been open since 2007 and we're an anti-racist museum. It's in our DNA. A lot of museums having to play catch-up in this field, and they're making statements to say how they understand they need to be more diverse organisations and they need to be more diverse and inclusive, and that's great, that's a move forward, but we've done that here since 2007 and we're part of a longer narrative in the city of Liverpool. There was a transatlantic slavery gallery opened in this building, the Merseyside Maritime building where I am. The Slavery Museum's on the third floor, and that opened in the early 90s, and that opened in the early 90s because of community activism and community voices, particularly from the black community, who basically said, look, enough's enough, we need an institution, a facility that looks at the city's history and how it was the epicentre of the transatlantic slave trade, and also look at aspects of black history as well and make sure that people realise that there was a black community here long before the transatlantic slave trade. So to make the black community visible and to have their voices heard. And along with the museum and museum professionals at the time, they developed the Transatlantic Slavery Gallery. But it needed to move on, and it did some many good things, but it didn't really look at the contemporary issues probably as much as it should have done. So in 2005, 2006, there were plans to open a museum, not just have it as a gallery within the Merseyside Maritime Museum. And that's when I came into the role, and my remit was to make the museum more relevant to contemporary issues. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm actually sat here now in what's called the Anthony Walker Education Centre, which many of you will know is named after a young black man who was murdered because of the colour of his skin just outside of Liverpool. And when we opened in 2007, we wanted to highlight that horrendous murder, and we were going to use some film footage in one of our galleries, the Legacy Gallery that we have here. But rather than just show the footage, we wanted to do things differently. So we worked with members of the Walker family, and we invited G. Walker, his mother, and Dominique Walker, his sister, to come to the museum to give us their blessing, really, that we were talking about their son and that we were using the film in our racism and discrimination section, and they were very happy for us to do that. And then shortly afterwards we named this room the Anthony Walker Education Centre, which has had hundreds of thousands of young people in here, so they don't forget who Anthony was, because things can very easily go off the national radar. So it was really important for us to keep his name alive, and I've been a trustee of the Anthony Walker Foundation now for 10 years, and it's been an honour to be on that committee. So we always wanted to do things a bit different. We always wanted to show people we were an active museum wanting to engage in current issues and local issues. We're a very subjective museum. There's things that we want to get involved in, and that's what we've done. And I think we've gained a great level of trust within, and particularly within the black community in Liverpool. And that's why the museum also has a community advisory group called the Respect Group, and that's made up of community leaders, elders, and people from other organisations, including the Anthony Walker Foundations, and NGOs that focus on contemporary forms of slavery as well, which is a subject we also look at. And they meet myself and other senior members of the museum team every couple of months, and we discuss what our plans are and we get their input. Now moving forward, well, we're just about to embark on a major capital transformation plan. The Slavery Museum galleries are currently on the 3rd floor of the Maritime Museum, and it's a museum in its own right, but we don't have our own entrance, so we have owned a building adjacent to the Maritime building on the Royal Albert Dock. That was the old Granada TV building for many years, and we've owned the building since 2008, and in 2012 we renamed that building the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. building in the presence of his eldest son. And we did that to make a point for people to realise that we wanted this building to be the centre and to be a museum that kind of carried out all the kind of beliefs that someone like Dr. MLK stood for. So again, that was a big statement. Now it's a multi-million-pound project, and we need to get a lot of support, people on board for that to move forward, and we're working with the National Heritage Lottery Fund, and we're working with the Department for Culture, Media and Sport to obtain the funding to be able to do that. Because people often make reference to the fact that they don't think we have a museum that is of the same ilk and size of, say, the Museum of African American History and Culture in the United States. But we have close links with the Smithsonian, and in this very space I'm in now, we signed a memorandum of understanding with them in 2007, and many members of that team, including Lorna Bunch, who's now Secretary of the Smithsonian, worked very closely with us when they didn't even have any land themselves to build their marvellous museum, and they have a strapline 100 years in the making, and I always thought that was really powerful because I think it's very similar to our own journey here in Liverpool. So they've now opened, and it's a marvellous museum, and it's an important museum, and we've got more to do, and if we get the funding we'll be able to open an iconic building as our front door, where we'll be able to do a lot more work with a lot more young people, and to make it a place that people want to dwell and that people take a sense of ownership with, particularly the black community, and I want them to co-curate and work with us in new and interesting ways. So it's not just a museum professional saying, hey, look, here's some space, you could do an event in it. It's to actually engage them in developing the content and the displays and the exhibition. So we're very excited about that, and many of our community partners and stakeholders are really excited about that. So I think we can take the national narrative forward when you look at how the heritage sector works in the field of anti-racism. And maybe there'll be other museums that follow our lead and, for instance, become a third-party hate crime reporting centre, which we are, one of the first museums in the country, if not the first museum in the country to do that. So we can do more, but we need the support of government and charitable bodies. And for people who are watching this, speak to your MP, speak to your councillors, tell them that there is a national museum that exists. It's already doing some really good work. It already produces material for the national curriculum that teachers can use in citizenship and history to look at themes of human rights, for instance, the legacies of slavery. So we already do that, but we can do more. So I hope after you've seen this, you'll get on board with us on our journey. So thank you very much.